apparently the Big Ten in football has also released like the 2025 through 2028 conference opponents for all 18 teams. So I'm going to go over that as well. So, and I'm going to just do the same order that I did in that last video. So I apologize if this takes very long because it's all the years here. Now, Illinois, away games, Indiana, Purdue, Washington, Wisconsin, home games, Maryland, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, USC. Now, Indiana away games for 2025. I'm starting 2025, by the way. So now Indiana away games. Back to where I was saying: Iowa, Maryland, Oregon, Penn State, Purdue. Home games: Illinois, Michigan State, UCLA, Wisconsin. Now Iowa away games: Nebraska, Rutgers, USC, Wisconsin. Home games: Indiana, Michigan State, Minnesota, Oregon, Penn State. Now away games from Maryland, Illinois, Michigan State, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games: Indiana, Michigan, Nebraska, Washington. Now Michigan away games: Maryland, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, USC. Home games: Ohio State, Purdue, Washington, Wisconsin. Now away games for Michigan State, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, USC. Home games: Maryland, Michigan, Penn State, UCLA. Away games for Minnesota, Iowa, Northwestern, Ohio State, Oregon. Home games: Michigan State, Nebraska, Purdue, Rutgers, Wisconsin. Nebraska away games: Maryland, Minnesota, Penn State, UCLA. Home games: Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, USC. Northwestern away games: Illinois, Nebraska, Penn State, USC. Home games: Michigan, Minnesota, Oregon, Purdue, UCLA. Now, Oregon away games: Iowa, Penn State. Penn State's on there on the away games for Oregon. Failed to mention Northwestern before, but you get the point. Rutgers, Washington, away games. Home games: Indiana, Minnesota, USC, Wisconsin. Away games for Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan, Purdue, Washington, Wisconsin. Home games: Minnesota, Penn State, Rutgers, UCLA. Penn State away games: Iowa, Michigan State, Ohio State, Rutgers, UCLA. Home games: Indiana, Nebraska, Northwestern, Oregon. Now Purdue away games: Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Washington. Home games: Illinois, Indiana, Ohio State, Rutgers, USC. Now Rutgers away games: Illinois, Minnesota, Ohio State, Purdue, Washington. Home games: Iowa, Maryland, Oregon, Penn State. Now UCLA away games: Indiana, Michigan State, Northwestern, Ohio State, USC. Now home games: Maryland, Nebraska, Penn State, Washington, USC. Away games: Illinois, Nebraska, Oregon, Purdue. Home games: Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, UCLA. Now Washington away games: Maryland, Michigan, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games: Illinois, Ohio State, Oregon, Purdue, Rutgers. Now away games for Wisconsin: Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Oregon. Home games: Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Ohio State, Washington. Now 2026 goes as follows: away games for Illinois, Maryland, Michigan State, Northwestern, Ohio State, UCLA. Home games: Iowa, Nebraska, Oregon, Purdue. Indiana away games: Michigan, Rutgers. Start over on Indiana for me. So I apologize. Michigan, Nebraska, Rutgers, Washington. Home games: Minnesota, Northwestern, Ohio State, Purdue, USC. Iowa away games, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Washington away home games, Nebraska, Ohio State, Purdue, Wisconsin. Away games from Maryland, Nebraska, Ohio State, Purdue, USC. Home games, Illinois, Penn State, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. Away games from Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State, Oregon, Rutgers. Home games, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan State, Penn State, UCLA. Away games from Michigan State, Michigan, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games, Illinois, Nebraska, Northwestern, Oregon, Washington. Minnesota away games, Indiana, Penn State, Purdue, Washington, Wisconsin. Home games, Iowa, Michigan, Northwestern, UCLA. Away games for Nebraska, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State, Oregon, Rutgers. Home games, Indiana, Maryland, Ohio State, Washington. Northwestern away games, Indiana, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Oregon. Home games, Illinois, Iowa, Penn State, Rutgers. Now away games for Oregon, Illinois, Michigan State, Ohio State, USC. Home games, Michigan, Nebraska, Northwestern, UCLA, Washington. Away games for Ohio State, Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, USC. Home games, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Northwestern, Oregon. Home games for Penn State, Maryland, Michigan, Northwestern, Washington. Home games, Minnesota, Purdue, Rutgers, USC, Wisconsin. Now away games for Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Penn State, UCLA. Home games, Maryland, Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin. Now Rutgers away games, Maryland, Northwestern, Penn State, Wisconsin. Home games, Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Nebraska, USC. Away games for UCLA, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Oregon. Home games, Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue, USC, Wisconsin, USC. Away games, Indiana, Penn State, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games, Maryland, Ohio State, Oregon, Washington. Now Washington away games, Michigan State, Nebraska, Oregon, Purdue, USC. Home games, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Penn State. Now Wisconsin away games, Iowa, Maryland, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA. Home games, Michigan State, Minnesota, Rutgers, and USC. So that's 2026 right there. And granted, I know 2020 those could change, because what if they add some ACC schools for 2025 through 2028? I know. I'm just pointing that out as a possibility. Now 2027 away, now 2027 for everybody here. Illinois away games, Michigan, Minnesota, Purdue, USC. Home games, Indiana, Northwestern, Penn State, UCLA, Wisconsin, Indiana. Away games, Illinois, Michigan State, Minnesota, Purdue, USC. Home games, Iowa, Michigan, Penn State, Rutgers. Iowa away games, Indiana, Nebraska, Oregon, Wisconsin. Home games, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, UCLA, USC. Maryland away games, Iowa, Northwestern, Penn State, Rutgers, Washington. Home games, Minnesota, Oregon, Purdue, USC. Now Michigan away games, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan State, Penn State, UCLA. Home games, Illinois, Ohio State, Oregon, Rutgers. Michigan State away games, Northwestern, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, Washington. Home games, Indiana, Michigan, Rutgers, Wisconsin. Away games for Minnesota, Iowa, Maryland, Nebraska, USC. Home games, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio State, Washington, Wisconsin. Away games for Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, Washington, Wisconsin. Home games, Iowa, Minnesota, Oregon, Purdue, Rutgers. Now Northwestern away games, Illinois, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games, Maryland, Minnesota State, Nebraska, Ohio State, Washington. Away games for Oregon, Maryland, Michigan, Nebraska, UCLA, and Washington. Now home games, Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue. So nobody on their side for that time right there. Now, Ohio State away games: Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Oregon, Rutgers. Home games: Michigan State, Nebraska, Purdue, USC. Penn State away games: Illinois, Indiana, Oregon, Purdue, Wisconsin. Home games: Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Washington. Now, Purdue away games: Maryland, Nebraska, Ohio State, Oregon. Home games: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan State, Penn State, UCLA. Away games for Rutgers, Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Nebraska, UCLA. Home games: Maryland, Northwestern, Ohio State, Washington. Now, UCLA away games: Illinois, Iowa, Purdue, USC, Wisconsin. Home games: Michigan or Northwestern or Oregon, Rutgers. Away games for USC: Iowa, Maryland, Ohio State, Washington. Home games: Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, UCLA, Wisconsin. Now, Washington away games: Minnesota, Northwestern, Penn State, Rutgers. Home games: Maryland, Michigan State, Nebraska, Oregon, USC. Now, Wisconsin away games: Illinois, Michigan State, Minnesota, USC. Home games: Iowa, Nebraska, Northwestern, Penn State, and UCLA. That's 2027 right there. So this is the last one right here, and it's 2028. And I try to make this as fast as possible while seeing the right teams here. Now, Illinois away games: Indiana, Iowa, Northwestern, Oregon, Rutgers. Home games: Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, Washington. Indiana away games: Northwestern, Penn State, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games: Illinois, Maryland, Oregon, Purdue, Washington. Iowa away games: Michigan State, Minnesota, Penn State, Purdue, USC. Home games: Illinois, Nebraska, Rutgers, Wisconsin. Now, Maryland away games: Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, UCLA. Home games: Michigan State, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, Washington. Michigan away games: Ohio State, Purdue, Washington, Wisconsin. Home games: Maryland, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, USC. Now away games for Michigan State: Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Oregon. Now home games: Iowa, Minnesota, Penn State, Purdue, USC. Now Minnesota away games: Michigan State, Ohio State, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. Home games: Iowa, Maryland, Nebraska, Oregon. Now Nebraska away games: Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, Purdue, USC. Home games: Northwestern, Penn State, UCLA, Wisconsin. Away games for Northwestern: Maryland, Michigan, Nebraska, Purdue, Washington. Home games: Illinois, Indiana, USC, Wisconsin. That's halfway there on that year. Now, Oregon away games: Indiana, Minnesota, Penn State, Wisconsin. Home games: Illinois, Michigan State, Rutgers, USC, Washington. Ohio State away games: Illinois, Maryland, Penn State, UCLA. Home games: Michigan, Minnesota, Rutgers, Washington, and Wisconsin. Now Penn State away games: Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers, USC. Home games: Indiana, Iowa, Ohio State, Oregon, UCLA. Now Purdue away games: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan State, Rutgers, USC. Home games: Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, Northwestern. Now away games for okay, I just lost track where I was, but I'm going to go back to Rutgers. If I done that already, I apologize. But Rutgers away games: Iowa, Maryland, Ohio State, Oregon. Home games: Illinois, Minnesota, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA. Now UCLA's away games: Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, Washington. Home games: Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, Ohio State, USC. Now USC away games: Michigan, Michigan State, Northwestern, Oregon, UCLA. Home games: Iowa, Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue. Now Washington away games: Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Ohio State, Oregon. Home games: Michigan, Northwestern, UCLA, Wisconsin. Now away games for Wisconsin: Iowa, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, Washington, home games, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and Oregon. So that's 2025 through 2028. And I know there could be potential other teams down the line for the Big Ten, like from the ACC, potentially, if they get out of that grant of rights. So just keep that in mind, because if that does change and they add some teams, obviously the schedule is going to have to change. And how they're going to do this, I don't know. Like, I know they're going to try to find a way to keep it like the title game. I think they're going divisionless still. I think they still are, but I'm not positive. So we'll have to wait and see how they're going to do it for next year. Then for 2024, then we'll know what they're going to do from here on out. Anyways, if you like this content, like and subscribe, and see you guys later. On the road to 600 subscribers, of course, the ultimate goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can make money off of this and more. In addition, comment on the video and like the video to help the YouTube algorithm so more people can see it. And of course, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell as well so you don't miss any of these videos here.